a class divide on the left right now where you have privileged motherfuckers with health care who get mad at poor and disenfranchised people for not liking the politicians that they like. So why is this accepted on the left? People wondering why I'm going off on the Western left. This is why. This is why. There is no solidarity in this movement. So these privileged people, they see people get left behind. So if you don't support Medicare for all, how many people are going to die because of that? If you are not canceling student loan debt, how many people are living in poverty because of your decision? But meanwhile, privileged people, and I've seen their houses, it's not fair that I've seen it, but I've seen it. These people we talking about, they make a lot of money. The people make a lot of money, and then they get mad at protesters for challenging their favorite politicians. And yes, I am mad because I see people going along with it. I thought we were supposed to have class analysis, but apparently we don't. So when I get mad at the squad for funding the police more, how are you going to get mad at me for criticizing your favorite politicians when they are funding the forces of oppression that are killing us? You know why? Because you're a white privileged motherfucker who's staying at home knowing that you're not going to be a victim of police violence. So since you know you're not going to be a victim of police violence, you get mad at people who are calling out your favorite politicians for being complicit with it. No, we are not allies. No, we are not friends unless you stand in our community. And I'm calling all these people out because I am tired of people putting the preference and the opinions and the emotional health of the politicians over the activists.
Amen. So, Nick. Amen.
But where I come from, so I'm going to get to the question, but where I come from, we should have even given them a fucking excuse like, oh, technically Rome wasn't the one who did. I don't care. My response to that was, are you telling me that working class people should not challenge your favorite politicians? You made the argument why we shouldn't be mad at Bernie. You made the argument why we should be mad at AOC. Instead of be like, oh my God, these activists, they're so toxic because they mad at your favorite politician. Fuck you.
Welcome to another episode of the Nick and CJ show. I'm one of your hosts. I'm CJ. What's up, Nick?
What's poppin'? That was Rome laughing in the background. Oh, having a good time here. Rome's still here, by the way. He just gave my brother
and Rome's here too. Rome on tour for the poor. How many diapers? Y'all gave out hundreds of diapers yesterday.
Yeah, we got even more people that are gonna come out today.
Wow.
Then we're about to hit the gas station and give out some more and give out some gas. You know what I'm saying?
They're giving out gas cards. They're giving out food. Yesterday they had a barbecue. Diaper giveaway.
What was dope was as soon as we started barbecue, like a lot of our comrades in our community, they're like, oh shit, they really doing it. Mm-hmm. Almost like they didn't believe us, and then we started doing it, and more people started showing support.
Because
like,
we
get some more diapers. Shit.
People are so used to people saying stuff in the stream and not showing up.
Yeah.
They're used to that. So I guess that's the reason why you had that reaction. But today's topic is a very needed topic, but it's something we talk about a lot, but not necessarily in these terms. And that's PMC, or the professional management class. I guess there's some overlapping. In the past, we've used old left. And for that reason, we use old left to meaning that's the old way of thinking. How PMCs. This is the new way. So we started with that kind of term when referring to this sort of class divide, because that's really what it is.
I like to call it the boutique left as well.
Right, and I was just going to that. I was going, and then there's overlapping titles like the boutique left. But then I talked to Case Stubbney. He said, let's give them respect. They deserve. So I said, that's when I began to use the term reformist left versus revolutionary left. And I feel like we're revolutionary left. We're the actual proletariat. We're the actual working class network. A lot of other networks, a lot of other organizations are PMCs. We are the working class, and you were doing working class work in the community yesterday.
There doesn't have to be a split, but unfortunately, so many people in the professional managerial class are class loyal, and they enjoy the hierarchy that they have. They enjoy the fact that they have this elevated voice, and whenever they see workers step out of line, they see them not going and following the right protocol, for example. But also our guests, and we're gonna get into that as well.
Absolutely. Now, absolutely. Hey, what's up, fella? Now Now, the book, her name is Catherine Liu. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I'm going to bring her on in just a second. And her book is called Virtue Hoarding, the case against the PMCs, or the case against the professional managerial class. So now I haven't had a chance to read the entire book, but we're mostly going to lean on her expertise of writing after writing this book and having a discussion from the worker's point of view. And let's bring Catherine in now. Catherine, welcome to RBN and welcome to the Nick and CJ show. How are you doing today?
Hi. Thanks for having me. Sorry for the messy bookcase in the back.
Just no worry.
That.
This is we're proletariat station, so you're gonna hear Rome in the background. People cutting their hair. Okay. My daughter might walk in. So that's we're a proletariat, so that's completely fine. We understand. Now so this topic, this sort of divide between PMCs and what we call in working class that we see on the left is a class divide.
Yeah,
and
it is.
We talk about this on this channel all the time. So can you kind of just introductory tell us about your book and tell us about why you decided to write it before we get into the discussion?
Sure. Do you want, I can give you the long short version of what the class is, which is that, the tyrants, rulers always needed a literate class to interpret the laws and the word of God, right? So in the pre-capitalist world, you would think of this class as being like the church, the clerisy, because most people were not literate. And you had a ruler that had to maintain his rule. And so you had this sort of elite class of literate people who were usually church people under feudalism. And as capitalism created wealth for a new bourgeoisie, you have this explosion of literacy in Europe, still tiny group of people. But capitalism becomes more and more complex as we move from industrial to post-industrial capitalism. And this class becomes both secularized and more essential to the operations of exploitation and appropriation. So right now we're in a phase of financialization, and like financiers, Wall Street guys, they all have to have college degrees. This is a white collar class that does work that doesn't damage its bodies. And people say that in the Bureau of Labor Statistics, in 1900, most Americans were agricultural or industrial workers, and the professional elites or college-educated people were probably 3% of the workforce. Today, there are 25% of the workforce, and we have fewer and fewer agricultural workers and industrial workers because big ag is making more efficient and pushing small farmers off the farm. And as we all know, industrial elites moved all of our factories to the Far East, right?
Other countries, yes.
Yeah. So this class now it has done really well for itself by, in many ways, executing the will of capital by punishing workers, justifying low wages. And right now, because of inflation, because I'm older than you guys and remember this, inflation in the 70s justified Paul Volcker's shock treatment for the United States. It's going to be war from the top. They want to have a recession because they say that'll bring the prices down. You know what a recession means? It means bringing the wages down. And this is like everyone's gearing up for this now. It's unbelievable. But with regard to like African Americans, and I thought we would talk a little bit about this, Cedric Johnson wrote a book called From Revolutionaries to Race Leaders. Mm-hmm. And within each ethnic minority and women now, there's a class of leaders who are funded by NGOs, who come out of academia, who are like Obama, went to elite schools, and they create themselves as the voices of our various ethnic communities, right? Like I'm Asian American, right. Chinese American, and you have all of these people ready to assume the language to please the bosses, basically. And among the African American elites, there is a layer of elites now, from Kendi to Coates, who speak this language of race essentialism, and they never, or very rarely, talk about capitalism. And so why I wrote this book was because I I came from a family that was very much outside of this class, immigrants. My father came from peasants. My mother came from old veterans of the Kuomintang army. And I had all these illusions that if I worked hard and I was like the perfect little PMC person, that I would enter a world of enlightenment and truth and whatever, because, I came from a pretty, fucked up, violent immigrant family. And as I've played the game and through my whole life, I've seen that this liberal class, which prided itself on skepticism and critique and autonomy, is actually slavishly invested in the values that maintain the status quo. And so in academia now,
that hit me there. That line. Go ahead, continue.
So in academia right now, the things that are rewarded from pharma, from big pharma, from the STEM to a humanities, are all geared towards either conversion to profit. So we had this idea that scientists would be working on, pure scientific issues. Not true, because in many ways of big pharma and big medicine needing to cater to wealthy older population. And in the humanities, of course, we have much less money, social sciences as well, but we have to please donors from private foundations and granting organizations. And what the donor class is. Like, what Mellon Foundation is, Rockefeller, Ford. These were robber barons who had billions of dollars in today's money that they endow private foundations with, that are really shaping the agendas of liberal progressive organizations, including and especially the Democratic Party. Okay, so that was my long, short introduction.
No, that was great. Now I must say, in preparing for this interview, I've watched probably 12 hours of you speaking over various different videos.
Sorry.
No, don't say sorry. So I'm saying that to say, no, I do like the long. How do you describe it? Long short version.
The long short. Yeah.
The long short version is absolutely fine. So that is sort of what the book is about, and sort of a historical look at this class and why you decided to write it. And now, I know you're a Marxist. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, we're a Marxist-Leninist organization, and we're proletariats, we're working class. So in watching these interviews, it's been quite curious to see PMC's interview you on this topic, on this book, because it comes from a different sort of perspective that is not from the working class, like the sort of questions that's being asked in these sort of interviews. So I just I let Catherine know, Nick, ahead of time. Hey, we're workers, so we're coming from a completely different perspective. But I did like your answer to, or not your answer, but I did like your description on. I think you went on Rising. And let me see if I can bring that up. It's a short little clip, but I like the way you describe it. And then at the end, how you basically say there's no, like the PMCs are a problem, basically. So let me play it. You said it a better way. Let me play it, and then we can kind of comment on it at the end of the video. So let's watch it. It's a couple of minutes long, not too long. So let's watch it here.
In her book, Virtue Hoarders, The Case Against the Professional Managerial Class, author Catherine Liu makes the case that the professional and managerial class stands in the way of social justice and economic redistribution by promoting meritocracy, philanthropy, and other self-serving operations. Catherine Liu is a professor of film and media studies at the University of California, Irvine. She joined us now to expand on this. Welcome, Professor.
Hi, good morning.
Well, we spoke recently about some of these issues, but for people who aren't in the know, can you explain what the professional managerial class really is and why it's a problem?
So this is a class that has college credentials and usually is tied to a professional organization. So we're all members of this class. We graduated, we probably have post-secondary degrees, and we believe in information and learning. And we also don't really think of ourselves as workers. Our interests are aligned with the interests of professional managers and technocrats and engineers who are also members of our class. Now, since I'd say, 2008, this class has also been in trouble, but the top members of this class, the elites of the PMC, are copiously rewarded by capitalists. We're not small business owners. We usually work in large organizations. More and more of us as young people like yourselves are freelancers, but we really believe in the power of the degree and of the professions. If you think about the US in the early 20th century, this class was not very powerful. The AMA, the American Medical Association, was just forming. The Modern Languages Association, which is the professional organization that governs tenure, was just forming, and we were much less organized as a class. Today, we're much more powerful. We make up about 25% of the workforce, and I would say that our interests are not aligned with the interests of blue-collar workers.
That's where I'll stop it there. Our interests, PMC's interests, are not aligned with workers' interests. Can you explain what you mean by that, or can you go into more detail about that particular part?
So, even when they're progressives and they say like, oh, we want just social justice and we want equality, they don't really, the PMC as a class generally has a really hard time dealing with like workers' interests and workers' struggles. And they don't really see themselves as workers or people who can be organized because they identify with the values of the managers and the capitalists. So it's all about extracting efficiency and labor from laborers. Like,
like saying shut up and just go vote.
Oh yeah, that's like an incredible thing. And I think all the culture war things are about that. Like it's all about cultural consumption, lifestyle practices. This is a lot about what my book is about, right? Because it's really hard if Americans have a hard time focusing on what it is to be a worker. It's because of this class. All of our ideological content is about like empowering ourselves through consumption habits. Like, oh, I want to go green. I have solar panels. I do this. I do that. It's all people who are really wealthy who can make those choices, who appear progressive. But what it is to be a worker, what it is to have a working day, how that working day is governed, all of these nitty gritty issues, these are workers' issues, and what our benefits are, what our healthcare is. You guys just did that whole thing on healthcare. Do you know the single most important thing right now for the American worker, women, I don't care what, and what race you are, is Medicare for all. Why was that such a hard issue for people to wrap their heads around in 2016 and in 2020? Like my colleagues who all, including me, we live in this nice neighborhood. We all make a good living. They were all for Warren because they were like, oh, she's so smart. Bernie can't do anything. And I was just like, you know what? This is part of the problem. This class votes more than working class people, right? So they have a disproportionate amount of power, and also they give money. And when those two campaigns came about, because I always thought I was like a secret socialist, I was kind of crazy, and then Sanders made me think, oh my God, there are other people that believe in what I can believe, like maybe what I really believe can be realized in my lifetime. Unfortunately, whatever happened, and it was like really tragic for all of us. But when I saw my colleagues be like, oh, well, I'm still studying the issues and Bernie can't do this, I was like, oh my God, this is so simple. If you care about women's issues, you know, a lot. If you care about racial equality, if you care about inequality, then this should be so simple. Get rid of for-profit healthcare. Get rid of insurance. Get rid of big pharma's big profit margins on the health of Americans, right? And empower workers with transportable healthcare to move from one job to another. You know what? Not having single-payer healthcare is the single most terrorizing thing for the American worker. If you lose your job, you can go bankrupt, you can die, right? So you have to be disciplined. It's a disciplinary issue. It's actually worker discipline. Like, I have to put up with my boss because if I don't have healthcare. Imagine if people had healthcare and they were just like, you know what, I don't like this job. My healthcare is portable. Imagine that woman who's in an abusive relationship with her husband who gives her healthcare and she's got kids. If she had portable healthcare, she would leave that relationship, right? So when people talk about like equality and all this other stuff and they don't take this seriously, or they say it's impossible, like Obama did, and his healthcare experts, you know that it's because they hate worker autonomy. They hate the working class. They hate the blue collar worker, because this is the single most impactful thing that could happen. And it's like socializing healthcare could just change the lives of American workers for the good, like 1,000%.
If you don't mind, if I just say, I'll pass right to you, CJ.
Sure,
you see the professional managerial class, even during the COVID crisis, was pushing all these wonky technocratic solutions to the problem. When there was just a study that came out that showed that over 300,000 lives would have been saved if we had universal healthcare in this country.
Right.
But if you ask someone in professional managerial class what we should do for the working class in the middle of this pandemic, they will tell you 1,000 different things, but healthcare wouldn't have been one of those. That illustrates the example that
I know. They'd be like, "Oh yeah, you should wear masks all the time. Oh yeah, clean all your groceries."
Mandates.
Everything, everything individual about individual choices, rather than these like major infrastructural changes that could have been made, right? The other thing, the reason why America really was pounded by early days of the pandemic was that the hospitals had cut their budgets so lean that their ICU they had like very limited ICU beds in each hospital, because they all, even the not-for-profit hospitals, were operating in very, very lean margins. We all know what that is. That's austerity, like cost cutting.
Right.
So when they say like 100% of our ICU beds are occupied, it's because there were probably 8 ICU beds in each hospital. Those are the kinds of, that's the kind of medicine that doesn't make money. What makes money? Plastic surgery. Elective medicine makes money. So they probably had like 100 plastic surgery surgeons like doing nothing, twiddling their thumbs. I'm kind of exaggerating, but not really.
How funny. They cut hospital beds and then blame the workers for it. You guys are getting sick. How dare you?
Right.
Go ahead,
Right. No, you're pointing out what I was just gonna say. The point of the discussion at that time should have been not stop reaching capacity, but why is capacity so low? That should have been
question number one for all of us. Why has public health been cut to the bone? Why?
Right. That is so key to understanding how the duopoly stays in place, also along with it springboards into a lot of other things. But let me move to this question, or let me move to a little more clarity, because we're talking about PMCs, and I like how Jen explains the upper echelon of PMCs here. So let me just let her kind of define that, because we're gonna zero in on like the ones that you said they're being heavily rewarded with money. Those people at the higher echelon of the PMC. So let's listen to that explanation of that of the upper part of that class. Oops, 1 second. Sound. Now let's see it.
Just sort of like lay out what we're here to talk about. So Catherine, we asked you on to talk about what we and Piketty call the Brahmin left, right?
Yeah.
I feel like this is very closely related to a lot of the stuff you've been saying and writing about on the professional managerial class, as I mentioned earlier. Again, just as a quick gloss for people who haven't heard the term Brahmin left, as I mentioned earlier in the show, it comes from the economist Thomas Piketty, and he basically coined this term to refer to a segment of the electorate that is, extremely highly educated. So definitely college degree, if not master's or PhD. These people tend to be concentrated in big democratic cities on the East and West Coast, hold very cosmopolitan values, and most crucially, vote Democrat, vote Democrat or vote for liberals, and now, control the Democratic Party.
Yeah.
And I had hinted at this earlier, but Piketty wasn't really using the term Brahmin left as a pejorative, although I'm sure you could do that. So he wasn't really saying champagne socialist or limousine liberal, although again, I'm sure there's, overlap within all of those categories. He was really invoking this term because he was talking about the larger process of class de-alignment, right? Which, again, we talk about on the show a lot. It's this phenomenon where low income, low education voters used to vote for center, left, and left parties. So in the US, the Democratic Party, in the UK, the Labour Party. And
let me just clarify for our audience, because they'll say something. Wait a minute, you didn't correct that. We don't consider the Democrats center left. We consider them center at best, but I consider them center right.
Right.
And maybe the Republicans are center right, I guess, if you want to say they're extreme. So that's how we view it here on this network.
And that basically continued overall through the 1950s and 1960s. So, what's basically happened since then is, according to Piketty, you now have a center-left party in the US, which is the Democrats, which is controlled by what he calls the Brahmin elite, which is the group that I just talked about.
Mm-hmm.
And then he says that on the other side, you have the right, which is controlled, or the Republican Party, which is controlled by what he calls the merchant right. So this is high income, high wealth people who are still voting basically their class interests, right? They're voting for the Republicans who will give them tax breaks, who will slash social spending.
And oftentimes, if I can interrupt for 1 second, this merchant elite, they may not have made their fortunes based on their credentials. So they didn't go to the elite schools. They might have gotten business degrees. They're not as credentialed prestige mongers as the Brahmin left. So I want to
So that's exactly. That's the crucial difference. The Brahmin left is elite in the sense that they're highly educated, and the merchant right is elite in the sense that they're high income and high wealth. But I think the problem here is clear, which is that these are both groups of elites, right? So we basically have two political parties in the US, which are both controlled by a different set of elites, but neither of which represent the working class. And, I would go so far as to say neither of these parties represent most working people.
So I play that also to pivot a little bit this conversation to these parties, because this is specifically why we advocate not to support Democrats or Republicans, because of what she just said here, which neither one of them represents the working class. And we want the working class to be, we want our ideas to be represented, and not for people to say, wait till next time. This is not the right time. So we advocate, and I must say, we advocate aggressively for the working class not to support either of these parties. But can you speak to how she defined what we can call it the Brahmin left, or just the upper echelon, but let's call them the Brahmin left. I think that's what she said. The Brahmin left. Can you speak more about the upper echelon of the PMCs?
Sure.
And then also that last part about the Democrats or Republicans, by the way, not representing the working class. Can you speak to both of those points?
I will, but I do just want to emphasize one thing, Jay. I totally agree with you about aggressively advocating for supporting neither party at this point. I'm totally with you on that. I know that it's not necessarily popular on all levels of left, but I don't really care anymore. I just want to say that I feel like working class people have been in an abusive relationship with the Democratic Party. And it's
Preach,
time
you
to just
preaching.
like
You're
quit
preaching.
that
Preach.
quit that abusive relationship, because you keep hoping that your partner will change. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
They're not changing.
And
And the
there,
sooner
there's
we realize that, the better.
the only thing I'm about to
That
say,
is
I'll pass it
great.
right
Go
back
ahead.
to you guys.
Go ahead.
They say, like, when asked why they decided to fund the police more despite the protests, they said because we ran on it and they voted for us. So they will use your support against you guys because they use your support as a mandate. So the whole ideology, remember the Sam Cedar ideology that we broke down, CJ? You don't vote with your feelings. You don't vote for your value. You just vote for whatever makes the most sense. No, the establishment takes your vote as an endorsement of their policies.
Yeah.
So if you vote for Joe Biden, he said, no, well, yeah, we are sponsoring genocides in multiple countries, but you voted for me though. So that's how they play that. So I just want to add that context. I'll pass the vote back to you guys.
Yeah, no, both of your comments, very very welcome. In adding that, I want to give it back to you just so you can further explain what you were saying. Go ahead. Speaking about the Brahmin left versus Brahmin left, or you were gonna answer that question about the Brahmin left first, and also to speak to the point about neither major corporate parties representing the working class.
So I'm criticizing mostly the liberal, like Brahmin left, right? And so they come out of these higher education organizations, and they really want to set the agenda for the left liberal movements of the United States at this point. Like some of their politics are cooked up in their seminars at Yale, at Hopkins, at Harvard, and there's a consensus. They have a consensus, and we need to break that consensus. But there's an elite consensus. You can read it in the New York Times. You can read it in the Washington Post. And it's all about this kind of like reasonable, incrementalist, realist motion, kinds of change that can happen, right? And you called them, a reformist party, but they don't really want to change like the capitalist mode of production or, worker relations to their bosses. And they're really, really powerful. I mean, one thing that I wanted to say is that we should never underestimate their power and their viciousness too, and what they control. And the thing that I think young people in the left, like in DSA, who are for Bernie and who participated in those movements, and those who've embraced the language of the Brahmin left and these liberal elites and reformists, I'd say is because in large part, they're hoping for jobs. They're hoping for jobs in the political establishment. There are rewards for being, for aligning yourself with the language of the elites. And they're aspirational. They're young people who are aspirational PMCs at this point. And that's how capitalism controls its educated classes, is by doling out rewards and withholding other rewards. I mean, if you look at the history of Taylorism in the early part of the century, like they started speeding up the assembly lines because they wanted to make more rational and efficient modes of production in factories when the United States was still an industrial power. And in the early part of the century, when they imposed these rules, people resisted them, right? Workers were like, we don't want to work this fast. This is horrible for us. And it was a level of engineers and managers like Frederick Winslow Taylor who use camera analysis to extract and make more efficient working processes. And so if you were a foreman under a Taylorist regime and you could get the other workers to work harder for less, you were really copiously rewarded. Like the bosses realized that at that level, you had to pay your foreman more. You had to pay your overseers more. And that's in a way why the PMC has prospered at times when wages have been compressed. Now, we know that in the 70s, we saw a lot of blue-collar downsizing. In the 80s, we saw a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and there was white-collar downsizing. But the more people are afraid for their jobs, I'm going to come back to this constantly, the more the ones who think they're the smarter ones will be craven and try to get the rewards from their overlords because they're terrified of falling. This is what Barbara Ehrenreich wrote about in the 80s when Reagan started undoing the social safety net. Like people are just like, not like, let's preserve the social safety net, but like, how can I get me some so I don't fall into the abyss? And it's worked really well up until a certain point. But right now, I'm just like thinking, this class offers solutions that come out of these, laboratory conditions in these universities, and how do we have to reject them? And how do you create solidarity and trust with working class people, right? How do you say like my interests are going to be aligned with your interests? Well, first of all, don't tell people how to talk. Don't tell people how to talk to each other. Like rule number one, don't tell people how to talk to each other.
You don't understand how much we could sit here and listen to this all day because this is like what we've been saying.
Can I ask something, CJ?
Because to hear academics come on our show and say the same thing that these workers, it gives it more validity, whether we like it or not. That's what happens. Go ahead, Nick.
I know.
The point that Catherine made that was so on point, what we mentioned as well, is the fact that they had to protect their own jobs, their own interests. That's them protecting their class interests as well. Have you guys seen the many people in the professional managerial class that we have criticized who, whenever they talk about third parties, for example, they twist themselves into a pretzel to explain why we shouldn't support third parties? And also, even on basic foreign policy topics, like they can't go too far on some of them. Like they had to twist themselves into a pretzel to explain why Israel's not that bad, that we should stand for Palestinians, but we shouldn't be too mean to Israel. These are the anti-BDS members of the elite academia that's so prevalent. So that's such a great example, Catherine, and because those are two qualities that we see all the time from the professional managerial class. So I'll pass it back to you guys.
Well, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, speak to what you're going to say. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I thought was really critical, in terms of the politics that I've seen today, is that rather than like thinking about like what workers need or what working class culture is, the PMC is constantly creating like, I don't want to say like weird hothouse cultures that it wants to impose on the working class. Let's just say the working class is still the majority of Americans, right? 64% of Americans don't get a college education. That's the majority of Americans. Then of the people who do get an education, like nurses, teachers, they're unionized and they are at the lower tiers of the PMC. So I feel like 75% of Americans probably work in jobs that, are physical, that are demanding, that don't actually really need the credential, right? But the PMC wants to make it seem like, oh, you got to go to college to do these things. Well, it's because they want to make college the distinction that will allow them to keep being paid more, and then say, well, you're just doing that job. It's not that you're not that smart, so you can be paid less. The fundamental principle of Marxism that I feel is really important is that all workers, every single human being deserves to live with dignity, autonomy, and freedom. That's just so simple. And that, yes, you might be smart and do something good, but the people who are really making the wealth of this culture, who are, harvesting the harvest, who are making the stuff, who are shipping that stuff, like they deserve all our respect and dignity. And the total of GDP or the social treasure should be redistributed in great amounts to them, right? I don't think it's such a complex idea, but this idea is seen as radical and terrifying because it's just fundamentally redistributive. And I'm not talking about like language police or this, like some far-fetched idea that the PMC progressives will impose on people. I'm not even going to talk in specifics because there's so many third rail topics. I don't want to be persecuted at my job because I just want to do my job. But right now, there's so much mutual surveillance going on, but there's all these ways of talking to people and about people that humiliate the non-college educated person. And that to me is just totally fucked up. And the other thing about, Marx's conviction is that the party or, intellectual cadres should first of all learn from the needs of the workers. So what we should be doing, saying like, what do you need? How can we help you? How can I, from my position of privilege, help you? Or how can I do this? Not like in some kind of allyship thing, but really like learning what people on the ground need, right?
Let me interrupt you there. Sorry. Let me just say this. I don't want to be, because that's exactly what we've been saying. We've been saying, hey, if you're gonna say you're left and you want to be down with this whole thing, okay, we're saying you should just let the most marginalized take the lead. You should be the support. You shouldn't be with the mic leading the masses. That's not what you should be doing. If PMCs, that's the role that they have now, should be reversed.
Yeah.
The people who are being most affected by climate change, let's let them have a mic. The people who are being most affected by the police state, the people who's being more affected by the war machine. Not you that's living nicely with a nice paycheck and got everything and wants to be promoted into the upper echelon of the PMC. Right. So you really stay within the same boundaries that the Overton window that is approved.
Yeah. And, what is that solidarity and how do we build that in the working class? Like, I do feel like American individualism has destroyed our ability to be with each other and work with each other. So how do we, the working class is affected by this as much as anyone else, even more, because, there's Jennifer Silva's work. There's been all this work done about how the American working class is falling apart into kind of some asocial, individualistic, internalizing its own shame about its poverty and everything else. And that kind of education and that kind of about solidarity is something that we maybe need to take a backseat on, or else just speak against the individualism of our culture that's so corrosive to our social lives and so corrosive to solidarity. And one thing I think is really profound for me is that, we know that in the working class world, everyone's very rough with each other because you rely on each other in the factory, right? And now the PMC teaches us to talk to each other like with velvet gloves, like, oh, I can't say that. Oh, here's my white privilege. Oh my God, I'm going to check this. And when that when you're working for a cause together, if you're actually like, or if you're on the factory floor, right, if you're in Amazon, if you're in PS, you have to depend upon each other. You're rough with each other and you have trust. Like, this is another thing the pandemic has done to us. It's made us afraid of other people. It's made us actually terrified of other people. Other people to us are like the source of the virus, right? That's terrifying. And already we've been distrustful of other people. And I don't know how we can work together to promote more solidarity and social trust. One thing very basically is unions. The next thing is actually denouncing honestly what we think is wrong, not being like, oh yeah, you know what, I completely understand this fake hypocritical language of harmonization. We need to stop that. And I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and people tell police are being because we don't do that. We call balls and strikes, even if we have to use uncomfortable language to do it. And you make a great point about talking to workers, because this is a criticism that we made even about like the Neil Turner campaign, where a lot of people have no idea how to talk to workers. The professional managerial language and their ethics and speaking does not apply to the majority of the working class. We just had a barbecue in Kansas City. We giving away all these diapers, being working class people, and we are not worried about tone policing and pushing this managerial class politics to them. We are talking about building community, addressing the material conditions. We have Rome preaching to people in the neighborhood now that will be turned off otherwise. That's right. If you had like a partisan professional managerial approach.
What are you going to do?
class is
Lecture them
Yeah.
on Marxism when they don't have baby formula? You know, like what are you going to be like?
Right,
Oh yeah,
right.
let me tell you about the dialectic. People don't trust each other already. You know, like this is what the left has to do is build a base of like trust based on material interest, and not like, oh yeah, here, let me tell you what you're doing wrong. Oh, here, you've got like bias. Let me tell you how to get rid of your bias.
When I
Go
used to
ahead, Nick.
canvas, I used to tell I didn't even have like an agenda. I used to go to people like, what's going on in your life? Like, what do you think government is not doing for you? Then people will naturally go to healthcare, my housing is expensive. Then from there, and then you can drag them to your side. That's how you open the
Politics,
conversation with those people.
politics is life. You don't have to specifically go after any ideology. You talk about life and it's politics. Politics is life. That's what I always say. But let me play this clip. Nick sums up this whole cycle that the working class is in, has been stuck in, that RBN, we here on this network is saying we're aggressively trying to get the working class out of this cycle here.
Okay.
Crazy Republicans scare the shit out of people. Democrats promise a slightly more progressive agenda. They don't do the slightly more progressive agenda. People get pissed off because things get worse under Democrats than they do under Republicans because they essentially govern like Republicans. Then they forget how bad the Republican was because they're so upset with the Democrat. Then they elect the fascist Republican. Then we repeat the whole cycle again. That happened with George Bush. George Bush was so bad, we fucking elected a black man. And then Barack Obama pissed people off so bad, we elected a game show host. And then the game show host fascist pissed people off so bad, we elected Jim Crow Joe. And now the cycle is about to continue again. It's so predictable. That's literally our design. But go ahead, CJ.
This is the cycle that the working class has got to get out of. And like I said, we aggressively trying to remove this grip that people have on the working class. And it's what do you call so you have the Brahmin left, which is like the upper echelon of the
liberal
PMCs.
classes. Yeah.
Is there a for the lower, like the ones in training, like the ones that are just graduating with their degree? Is there a separate name for that?
Well, I think the ones that are just graduating from those elite universities like Yale Law School or Harvard, they're Brahmins already. Like it's not doesn't matter to them. But I was thinking more like the lower tier PMC right now who are, in trouble, like in the squeeze all the time. Like I said, are teachers, public school teachers, public employees, and nurses. Because they're like being punished by the large organizations that they're living in. They don't really want to have the kind of prestige that the PMC elites want. They want to make a good living. They believed in like getting their degrees. They're working at their jobs, and their jobs are getting worse and harder to do. And they are organizing, and they've had organized unions, and some of those unions are not necessarily very progressive, but there are those structures in place. Most Americans now are, not in unions. And so, so I was thinking like lower tier PMC,
I think a good example of what you mean, Catherine, when you say they're already used to part of that same class. Anderson Cooper, before he became Anderson Cooper, was in college whining and dining with the same members of his class that he would later report on in favorable, lighthearted fashion.
That's right.
So when you don't see them, there's someone who's an assistant to an editor who's trying to be the next professional manager. I think that
they're going to be the next Anderson Cooper. Like we don't know them yet, but they're like Harvard freshmen, or you know what, like Malia and Sasha Obama. Are they really aspiring or lower tier? They went to Harvard. I don't know where the younger one went, but they're in the class already. They have all of that social and cultural capital.
They interned with Harvey Weinstein.
They did, like using their father's networking abilities. Like you can't say that they're lower tier. They're just younger, like fully integrated members of the Brahmin left who are going to ascend. Like to recognize that kind of person, not as a culture hero or, people embracing Michelle Obama. that's hard because all of the ideology right now, liberal ideology, just says like, no, it's great. They're African American women, they're empowered, they're going to be, this is what we need. And this is a kind of cosmetic, performative politics that
Right.
the Democratic Party just wants us to buy into. And it's really hard to get people out of that kind of spectacle. It's the spectacle. It's the commodification of politics as spectacle. And this is what you were talking about in that clip you guys played. It cycles through. It's like the same soap opera being played every 4 years. We go through discontentment, then there are polls, and we vote. Then like there's a progressive person, then there's the conservative person, and then we struggle, and then suddenly like there's a solution, and then we're really unhappy with it. Like, how do we break this cycle of this, soap opera that we're in? And first, it's to acknowledge that it is purely performative, that it's empty, but that it disguises the class interests of monopoly capitalism, and that it is against the majority of people. The people have been so disempowered. Like, what if you're a working class person? You're really tired at the end of the day. You don't want to be like, if you have kids, like, I was a working mom. Now my son is older. Like, I was just surviving. Like, most working people just are surviving. So they don't have a lot of leisure time to be like studying the issues or doing what needs to be done to make the right decisions. And that's the illusion of voting that people, that the Democrats want. Like, if we just educate our work, if we just educated people and they saw how good we were, then they would vote for us. Well, it's like, that's not the political education that the left needs, that you guys are talking about. It's like actually creating a social political space that's not controlled by the media elites, that is about like building solidarity among people who should have interests in common. I mean, this is the thing that Marx predicted, that everyone was like, okay, he was wrong about, is like, he always said there were more workers than there are capitalists, right? And when you had all the workers of England grouped in these miserable factories in London and Manchester and Liverpool, capitalism did this trick to itself that might have been its own undoing, because when you have 10,000 workers in a factory and they suddenly look at each other and they go, oh my God, we're more powerful than the guy who owns us or who owns the means of production, then you have worker unrest and you can overcome the contradictions of capitalism through this kind of solidarity. But people like, it didn't happen. Okay, you know what? Capitalism is really, really smart and foxy. They realized that when they had the workers like this and in the stranglehold in the 19th century, during the worker unrest, early 20th century worker unrest, the Great Depression, there was another machine that created a kind of ideological hegemony called, the culture industry and leisure time. And they, make all of our spaces of sociability dominated by media consumption, by content consumption, by this kind of ideological indoctrination. So not only do we have the church, I mean, Marx talked about the church, right, as a an obfuscating factor for working class people. You know what we have? We have self-help. And the self-help industry is so unbelievable. And it's all about taking responsibility for your own unhappiness. And it's all about this kind of pseudo empowerment. What's really amazing is that working class people are the biggest consumers of self-help right now. And there is like it's a $1 trillion industry right now with streaming media, books, all this other stuff. And so what we have to fight against is not just it is capitalism. It's this whole ideological construct that moves into your life and takes it over. Like Marx's attacks on the church were one thing, but the culture industry is taken over a lot of that space of the church and really create a kind of sociability that is all about undermining the possibilities of solidarity. Okay, that was. I
cannot agree more with that assessment. Let's slightly interject this part because both of you made a point that kind of talks to civility politics. So let me play. It's about a 40-second clip where you talk about civility politics here. So let's listen. think it plays automatically. Hang on a second here. I think it plays automatically.
I think it's like etiquette and an attitude. And so to be part of this Brahmin left, you have to obey the etiquette. And it's etiquette that's designed to denaturalize certain kinds of relations with people you might have. And it's designed, I've said this before in other ways, to humiliate working class people because they are not initiated into the etiquette. And so on that level, yes, it is a problem of like alienating the majority of people in America by coming up with these crazy ways of talking.
Now, I wanted to play that to speak to ask you about this, which is it's basically civility politics. This is how you stay within these boundaries, these pre-approved boundaries. And now this is why I was kind of leading to, what about the lower level, the ones that aspire to be in that? So the lower level nurses, I don't think they're aspiring to be in that sort of
right. Okay,
maybe we're talking about the middle section, because these are the ones, the tone police, the ones that want to make sure you're saying saying it in a certain way, make sure you're cutting out worker language. You go on the floors of a warehouse, workers are not worried about saying stuff this way and saying stuff that way. And it also speaks to what Nick was talking about, how they use civility politics against people like us who are more radical, who wants to push politicians more. You're too rude you're too rude. It's the civility politics and speaking in this certain terms, making sure you're only talking about these certain things. Can you speak to that and how it kind of stifles the worker voice and the worker needs or interests?
I've talked about this before with other people, but I feel like it was like a really crucial moment. I don't know if you guys were part of DSA in 2019 when they had that convention in Atlanta, and there were a bunch of people who said that they had sensory oversensitivity, and they told people they couldn't clap in the main convention room. Do you remember this?
I don't. You do, Nick? I don't.
Yeah, I've seen it, and this is. And just being around DSA folks and how
this is that middle level.
It's not for ordinary people. And we were just talking about this at our event. We had ordinary people at our event, and we was talking like ordinary people about radical ideas. You're not gonna win people over in the Midwest with the cringe that you see out of DSA meetings, like you described, right, Catherine?
So Jay, you missed out on all this. So there was a huge convention in 2019, right? There were all these frustrated Bernieites, everyone. It was like thousands of people met in Atlanta. All the newly formed chapters had representatives. They went to Atlanta, and they had like the main room where somebody got, and this is, I think, this is that lower tier PMC who wants to get a foundation job, but thinks that they're like really radical. And they said that there were people who had neurocognitive disorders who were very disturbed by loud clapping, so people had to do jazz hands, and they even had like a room for them, but still nobody could clap. Like you couldn't show spontaneous affirmation of what people were saying because it was going to disturb a group of neurodivergent people. And this is part of the kinds of undermining of like actual solidarity or natural conversation on the left that this organization in the end was complicit with, because if you want to alienate ordinary people or workers, like come up with these new protocols, and then people be like, this is not for me. Like I was even like, okay, this is really not for me. And I was really upset by that. But I do feel like it was a world historical moment when there was like, there could have been a change. Like imagine if I wasn't there, but imagine if I was there, I'd be like, you know what? I think we should clap. And then people would be like, oh my God, you're, anti-autistic and you're a villain. Like I would have been just demonized, like your average person who might have clapped.
You know what? I saw the video. Now that you say that, I seen the video. I think that's the one you're pulling up, Nick. I think now that you described that,
video. It's a 40-second video. Yeah, it kind of describes what you're talking about. Let's play it real quick. It's a quick video. I found it.
Did you find? Okay, sorry, we're bringing this. Oh my God.
Point of privilege.
This is so
privilege. Guys, first of all, James Jackson, Sacramento, he, him. I just want to say, can we please keep the chatter to a minimum? I'm one of the people who's very, very prone to sensory overload. There's a lot of whispering and chatter going on. It's making it very difficult for me to focus. Please, can we just, I know we're all fresh and ready to go, but can we please just keep the chatter to a minimum? It's affecting my ability to focus. Thank you.
Look at all of our reactions to that. Look at, you're holding in your laughter. Like, I'm just shaking my
Point
head.
of personal privilege.
Yes.
Please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
Quick.
Are these people fast, man? Like, this is like, remember the CIA list we went through?
She's holding in her laughter so hard.
Oh, no, I'm not laughing. I'm like so upset.
Oh,
It was a real historical moment. It's the American left for young people. And then we have someone like really, really upset about to have a breakdown. You know, like, can we please not? I think because she used "hey guys." I mean, it's like we're all policing each other to the point where we can't actually speak to each other anymore. And I know that we're not supposed to criticize DSA. I mean, when I get pounded on social media, it is when I criticize DSA.
Oh, no.
Wait. Let me just tell you, Catherine, the reason, I don't know if you saw our faces when you said, were you at the DSA? Both of us kind of looked at DSA is not really welcome in that way here nationally. There's a lot of great DSA people that's doing local chapter work.
Right.
That is not what I'm talking about nationally. We're not there. With DSA is part of the PMC problem.
Yeah. This is where I was going to, respond to your question, Jay. Like that aspirational PMC person took over DSA. Basically, that's what it is. That's how I think
I could have said that same. That is exactly right.
And you know what I know?
Exactly right.
And I know this just by being in left circles. Like DSA is like, so it's like a college experiment. Like there are a lot of young.
It's like a finishing school.
Yeah,
it's like finishing school for the left. So I'll tell you what one of the worst experiences I've had on social media. Sorry, we can just. I mean, whatever.
We're off the rails. We're off the rails.
So in March last year, 2021, it was still kind of in the middle of the pandemic. I was talking to some friends on Zoom because we're trying to keep in touch with each other, and one of them told me about organizing a year before the pandemic, where she brought in a bunch of working class people, hotel cleaners, to a DSA meeting, and these women came. She was trying to organize, and they came into the meeting, and then everyone's going around in a circle, saying like, "Hi, I'm Jay. My pronouns are he, him," or whatever, and then going around, and it's a large meeting. And as this was happening, the women just left and I was like, maybe this is not the best way to open DSA meetings. I was attacked for being a transphobe, a TERF. I was attacked for lying. None of this happened. Working class people are the most open to gender politics, and I was a fucking hypocrite. I was a liar. And someone actually DM'd me and said, I should just kill myself. Who am I? And Doug Henwood, who was of the on the left, allegedly said to me, "Who was this? Tell me who this was." And I was like, "I'm going to tell you who this was. I'm not going to compromise my friend. Like, who are you, the police?" And even if I were a journalist, I wouldn't give up my sources. You know what I mean? Like, this person told this to me in confidence, and I was still naively thinking at that point that we could have like a conversation about why DSA wasn't, working out the way we wanted it to. And then I realized like there was just no conversation to be had. And then people said like, "Have you ever been misgendered?" It was like, hello, there are no genders in Chinese. My father misgendered us all the time. He'd be like, "Your brother, she's doing this," or your sister, he's coming over here. We were just misgendered constantly. And I was thinking, because my aunt is a hotel cleaner, that if she is, not had a college education, that if she were one of those women who were in that room and she's like having issues with English to begin with, and she says like, "Here's you go. Hi, I'm Jay. My pronouns are he, him." She'd think it was an English lesson, and she had worked 12 hours a day on her feet, and she was going to leave.
Yeah.
And
Do you know what I mean?
And this is the bad strategy from the DSA people that push that stuff. Like, even if you believe that, like, when we build a working class movement, when we're talking to ordinary people, there needs to be room to have discussion about like important issues like these, right? Like you hear from Catherine, like people immediately slandered and said she a bigot, and I see this all the time. Like whenever someone even have a question about like the language that you guys use and the strategy that you guys using, and we got to be able to flesh these things out and have conversation, have different layers of understanding. And what kills the left is people like they would destroy worker solidarity based on someone not being on the same level of understanding on gender. Like I'm willing to work with people who disagree with me because I'm confident that through my example, through leading by example, and through intellectual and through education, I can drag people to my side over time. But they want to cut that off altogether. They were like, if you don't agree with us on pronouns or gender, for example, we will cut off the working class movement. You're canceled. It's over from there.
Yeah. And the thing is that, you know, maybe there is place for having political education or language education for working class women. But if you're coming to a meeting at 6 or 7 o'clock at night, you're sacrificing your family time. So, or you know what you need to do if you're a left organization is offer people something in return. Like give them something first, not be like, okay, you either obey or you don't. Like that's just a very naive way of thinking that you can bring people in to organizations, like giving out when you're giving out diapers or just having a barbecue. Have something social that builds trust rather than imposing these forms of like discipline on people who you don't know and whose life circumstances you have no idea about. Like I swear to God, hotel cleaners in the Northeast are usually Asian American, and they are very tired or Latino. They don't speak English that well. They don't want to. I'm just speaking from my aunt's point of view. Like if I think about my aunt, she'd be like, what the hell's going on here? And she would just leave because even if you're an organizer who's like, this is a really good organization, this is a left organization, come into this organization, how do you welcome someone who's not used to this culture of, left liberal?
Maybe it's meant to exclude. Maybe it is meant to exclude. And Nick, if you would later bring up the CIA infiltration tactics.
You know, I always down to bring that up.
I love that. The CIA sabotage handbook.
Yeah,
oh my God.
just keep bringing up nonsensical things, play out things over and over and over. These are CIA tactics. That's why I say, what is DSA for? Like, what are they doing? Maybe it's intentional to have this organization without the working class, to not be able to build that solidarity. Nick, if you didn't have anything prepared, I'm going to bring up this here because I wanted you jump, both of you kind of jumped the conversation. This was the next third video I was going to play, sort of the last video, but you jumped to the part where we're talking about organizing by way of interest or organizing by way of values. That's what the debate that both of you are sort of talking about. Organizing through interest. The interest is we want to get paid $30 an hour. The interest is we want to have health care. Values are we believe everybody should be saying these pronouns at the beginning of our meeting. That's a different. So it's organizing over that or organizing over interest. And right here, I think it's Jen that explains that. So I like how they explain it. And then we can kind of talk about it on the other side here.
And then you build the consciousness.
Actually, 1 second. Let me back it up 1 second here.
And class for itself, that is class formation. You can't even post a question about how to organize people. Because if you don't think there's a class structure and you want to organize, who are you organizing?
Yeah.
You're just randomly going to go out into the street and you pick the Wall Street banker, you pick the fashion model, you pick the grad student, and you pick the worker, and you go, hey, let's all make a class.
Yeah.
The reason socialists came to this distinction, as in everything else, was through hard experience.
Mm-hmm.
Hard experience was you cannot look at politics as consciousness raising. Right. You can't look at it as essentially a cultural act in which you bring people together around their values. Because what you see is in the long run, people pursue their interests.
Mm-hmm.
What values and interests? because a person is always going to pick their interest over their values because the interest is how you sustain life.
Unless you're
That's the
so
reason.
wealthy that you can pretend that you have no interests. Unless you live
Right.
literally on the interest of your wealth.
And that is the issue with PMCs being the main voices of the left. This is what we
Yeah.
say all. This is the issue. You don't
Yeah.
have a reference point to even speak to the needs of everybody. You don't have that because you just, by experience, it's not your fault. We're not saying go be poor so you can understand. We're simply saying fall back and let the people who are being affected be the main voices. Let's go. What do you think we should do? Oh, we should be fighting for this. Let's go fight for that. Not these like half measures, these sort of half steps. But can either of you, if you wanted to chime in on what he's speaking to right here, and that is Vivek Chibber. Do you know that? Do you know?
Yeah,
Vivek?
I do.
Okay,
I do.
absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead.
So one of the things that I think is like based on Marxism is that we do have economic interests, and those are our overriding values. They actually do shape our values. The problem is that the PMC tries to disguise its economic interests as like universal values, and that's just not the case. For Marx,
can you say that again? Can you say that line again? That is so very important that people need to catch that. Can you say that last?
Oh, sure. So for Marxists, your values are shaped by your economic interests and your relationships to the mode of production. But the PMC wants to disguise its interests as universal values. And so the universalism of Marx says we all workers deserve to live with dignity. The human history is a striving for emancipation. But the bourgeoisie and the PMC say our values are universal values and everyone should strive to be like us because that keeps the status quo intact. And so a Marxist universalism is really different from a liberal universalism. And the PMC right now doesn't really even have a universalism because it's all about this like tolerance of difference and the destruction of bias. What is their idea of utopia? A world in which no one has any more biases, but all of our economic structures are in place? It's terrifying. And so, but I do think that is their value because that would be their ideal world. Like everyone free of whatever new bias they've come up with and all the economic interests still in the same place.
But if you're economically doing well, you see how it doesn't. You see how that doesn't matter. It's like, we're staying where we're at economically, and I'm up here, guys. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, since we talk about Marx, I love the amazing references, Catherine. This is the concept of class antagonism.
That's
the
right.
idea that you have class differences that are unreconcilable by the state, meaning that if you want to decide how we centrally plan our resources on who manage production, who has power, the class differences between the workers and the managerial class is irreconcilable. Yeah. If they have their political power, they have their way, they will impose their political power upon the workers. So it's upon the workers to oppose our political will among the professional military because there's an unreconcilable difference. But what the professional managerial class, like Catherine explains, they want to paint universal values that erases this irreconcilable class struggle, right?
That's right. That's right. And the other thing that I think is really important for Marx and for Marxists to understand is that historical progress is made by class struggle. It's not made by technocratic innovations from the top down. The technocratic innovations that we're living with are about preserving the capitalist mode of production. Like there is enormous, and the class struggle is not always like pretty, right? It's not like some fairy tale like Marvel story or whatever where you're like, oh yeah, and then things got better. No, things did not necessarily get better, but they changed. But things changed. And the things that changed had to do with the mode of production. So if you think about the transition from feudalism to early capitalism, it had to do with like a merchant class understanding that it had a lot more power than the nobility. So in feudal Europe, and you had nobility who were able to just like kill you because they had arms, they had fortresses, and the peasants were terrified of them. And then you had a king who was slightly weak, had to keep his nobles sort of happy. But once you had trade, and a lot of it had to do with like the Silk Road and trade with the East, you have this like Florentine nobility that arises that has to fight with this new merchant elite, which is the Medicis. And that class struggle is how feudalism was overturned for mercantile capitalism. Here's the other thing about history is that from a Marxist point of view, it's incredibly epic and exciting, but it's not the way that it's taught in schools.
Exactly.
Because it has to, we're in this Cold War, anti-communist world, so we can't teach history in this way. But if we taught history in this way, like kids would see like the stakes of history. I'm totally like over education now. I feel like here's what's happened too. Like we have more literate people in America than ever before, but our politics are worse than ever. So we really just need to have popular education. And I wish people in my profession, and I wish there was a structure for this, would get out and just do more popular education. Because I'm just like,
I love what you said, because I mention all the time that one of the reasons why I got the politics I have was because I became a history nerd. And I became a history nerd
on your own
after education. Like after I dropped out, I didn't like history while I was in school. I didn't like history. I didn't like the way they presented it.
No.
Because they presented from the perspective of the bourgeoisie through no class struggle. And I love what you said earlier, Catherine, because once you learn Marxist analysis, once you see everything through the lens of the working class, that's when history becomes interesting. Because then you look at it, we'll see how empires operate. You can see how the bourgeoisie always collides with the workers in these countries and how that relationship balances itself. So that's really what got me. I'm glad that you brought that up, but I'll pass it back to you guys.
Yeah, now let me go to this clip here, because this is Chris. He sometimes writes for Jacobin, but in this clip he talks about how people with degrees or PMCs in training have different interests than the working class. But it's I'll comment on after the video.
Then that proportion is much lower.
Right.
So yes, the point here is that taken as a whole, this question of kind of class composition, which often gets conflated with educational attainment for some good reasons. I think it can often serve as a useful proxy for class. It shows you that if we have a left that is disproportionately highly credentialed and what have you, then that's going to put people in a position that may well put them outside of the range of may make it more difficult for them to.
Let me just pause it here. I'm going to finish the video, but I find it very curious that a PMC is finding it very difficult to describe this particular point here. Very difficult to describe this specific point of how they're going to be very difficult to organize with the working class. It is a very touchy subject.
It's so painful. Yeah, it's so painful.
So let's listen again. Let him finish his comment, but I needed to insert that.
Also come out of. And I thought that was really striking. And I think in a lot of ways kind of indicative of and kind of a continuation of what I think is a long-standing kind of trend or situation on the left where, it's like if you look throughout, the history of the left, both in the US and many other places, you find a lot of people who, occupied this kind of social position, were, kind of caught between worlds or have a foot in two worlds or three.
I'm sorry. I didn't rewind it all the way back. I'm sorry. I thought I did 6.
I don't. What is his point? Maybe Jay, you can just tell us his point. Is it
his point? Well, no. I just want what I was playing this for. So what he's talking about, he's doing a review of a book. It's called the AOC something. I forget. Anyway, he writes an article that basically is examining what he's calling the lumino left, which is like PMCs in training. This is the PMCs in training. He's referring to them as the luminal left, and he's basically just making the point of how the interest of that group doesn't necessarily align with the interests of other working class. That's all his point. So let's listen for him to say all of what he wanted to say.
Okay, is much lower.
Right.
So yes, the point here is that taken as a whole, this question of kind of class composition, which often gets conflated with educational attainment for some good reasons. I think it can often serve as a useful proxy for class. It shows you that if we have a left that is disproportionately highly credentialed and what have you, then that's going to put people in a position that may well put them, outside of the range of, may make it more difficult for them to reach out to, work with, organize with people that aren't operating in the same kinds of social milieux.
It is excruciatingly difficult for the PMCs, PMC in training, Brahmin left, whichever, to discuss this specific point of how their interests, not supposedly, let's give them respect, they're left, but their interests have diverged simply because of a degree.
Yep.
With no sort of critical analysis of why does a degree make you all of a sudden have different interests, because now your interest is aligned with status quo. It's a lot of descriptions, but can you speak to the difficulty? Have you noticed PMCs having this difficult way, maybe DSA having this difficult way of describing it's
obvious,
organizing with working class? Go ahead.
It's obvious that, just on the level of culture and language, especially if you're like second, third generation white collar worker, you just haven't had a lot of contact with working class people. I mean, one of the things that's happened in the United States is that we have greater degrees of economic segregation than ever before.
That's true.
I grew up in suburban New York, but just right outside of New York City in Mount Vernon, where very famous, where Denzel Washington also grew up, actually. But it was like a very, very racially mixed, like first ring suburb right outside of the Bronx. And there were, in my schools, there were like kids from all different classes, from all different races. But now schools are much more economically segregated because of real estate and speculation. Like we have levels of economic segregation that we've never seen before. So the fact is that someone like, someone with a college degree from a family with a college degree parents are probably never going to have any contact with working class people. Or if they're going to do it, it's going to be like very artificial or weird. And so this is the kind of segregation that we're okay with, but we're not. But we want to have like all these different programs for racial desegregation, which is really powerful. But what about economic segregation? In California right now, in Orange County, the median home price is over $1 million. In New York City, someone just told me the median apartment rent is $4,000 a month. Who can afford that? I mean, real estate speculation has done what Jim Crow couldn't do, which is divide this country in an incredible, absolute way. So how can we fix this? Well, one thing is we should first be articulating this at every single occasion. Now, what the Chinese communists did, I mean, I don't want to be tanky here, but, Mao saw this happening within the party in the 60s, right? And he was in a struggle with Deng Xiaoping and the technocrats. And one of the things that happened in the Cultural Revolution was, and this is China, right, where you had like 30% literacy, and then the communists bring it up to about 70, and now today is like 90%. But in the 60s, if you had a high school diploma, you were considered an intellectual. And Mao sent this directive then for children of middle-class people in cities who had high school degrees, not even college degrees, to be sent down to the countryside to learn from the people. And this was like a very top-down thing. And I often think about this, and I often think about like, what would that program be? And would it be just like resume building for these PMC elites? We're like, oh,
imagine they had to watch RBN. That's what that means. Like imagine like instead of watching,
they would say.
They forced them to watch one of our streams.
I was gonna say they could come and shadow you, Nick. Like, do what Nick, be Nick's intern.
All right, let me access, because I don't want to. Maybe another 30 minutes we're gonna go. So let me make sure I include this part, because he goes on. He talks about how it's politics and movement building and organizing should be organizing around interests and not values. Not, you got to raise your consciousness. It's like PMCs want people to be there already, and then that's the people I want to organize with. They want them to have all the right language, have all the right credentials, have all the right things, and then okay, that's who I want to organize and not build from the ground up. So let me let him finish speaking, because then there's the grandioso, the question that is presented here that blows my mind, that this is swirling around in the PMC world.
Okay.
The reason socialists came to this distinction, as in everything else, was through hard experience.
Mm-hmm.
Hard experience was, you cannot look at politics as consciousness raising. Right. You can't look at it as essentially a cultural act in which you bring people together around their values. Because what you see is, in the long run, people pursue their interests.
Mm-hmm.
What values they have will be values orbiting around their interests, but they pursue their interests. We found that out through hard experience. It's intellectuals who are confused about it. So if, as socialists, you go, we want to organize, you have to know who is your constituency. And your constituency is generated by your analysis of the world out there, not public opinion polls or focus groups or something like that. Your analysis of the world, what its structure is, and that tells you, here's where I organize, regardless of what their immediate consciousness happens to be. That's where I organize. And then you build the consciousness.
You know, I have to say,
you organize and then you build a consciousness. I just wanted to reiterate that for our audience, because that's something you're gonna see that on RBN coming up very repetitively. But this is now, she goes into her question. So let's listen.
Your book is in some ways a bit depressing, or at least sobering, because if the problem is false consciousness, that's actually kind of easy to solve, because the answer is more magazines like Jacobin, or more YouTube videos, or like more philosophy professors, or more like pro-worker Marvel movies.
The current left, more shaming.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. Or more shaming and more hectoring. And yeah, exactly. But that's not, I mean, you obviously argue that's not the case. In fact, the problem lies in the actual structure of capitalism itself. So in many ways, that's like a much bleaker situation, because it's much harder to fight against that. So I'm playing devil's advocate.
Now, so here is where the question, just so you know, it's coming.
A little bit here, but what I want to ask you is, like, why then, given that the deck is so drastically stacked against working people in this way, why should we still think of the working class as the agent of change?
Now, I pause it there specifically because I don't want you to see his reaction. But my reaction, because I already reacted to this video, I was amazed that this question was even circulating in PMC circles. And not only that, she says that this is one of the more popular ones that's circulating. This speaks to what we've been talking about. It's the unwillingness, the refusal to organize, or the inability to organize with working people. So it's like, well, why do we need to use them as the agent of change? Right. Why can't we do something else? And maybe it's because we're Marxists here. That blows my mind that this question is being asked, Nick. I don't know if you heard the question, but it blows my mind that this question is being asked. But before we get Vivek's reaction to that question, what do you think that about this question being circulated in PMC circles, and have you heard this in your own sort of PMC circle?
You know what? I haven't heard this question stated so baldly, but it's sort of underneath. It's an undercurrent. And Jen says she's playing devil's advocate too. But part of my book was I wrote the book because I thought the PMC really wants to get rid of the working class now. They just think they're like a lot of trouble, and they don't obey everything that they say, and they want to be the agents of history. Like one of the points of my book is that the PMC wants to usurp the working class's historical agency and say, here's what we think is progress. Like, you guys are just a bunch of reactionary, racist assholes, uneducated idiots, and we are going to show you what progress is. So, like, move aside historical agency. Marx was wrong. We are the agents of history. So that's like, all of the polemical attack of my book is about that attitude. Like, you motherfuckers are so wrong that and I'm going to show you how you're wrong, but the thing is that it is a true tendency within the American left now and within the European left to say working class people are just idiots. They're like reactionary, they're innately reactionary, and we have to lead the way. So in that sense, like, I feel like with the Hillary Trump thing, with any working like PMC attitudes about people who watch Fox News, people who support Trump, people who don't align with their politics, they're just like, oh, they're idiots or racist, they're assholes. But the problem is that they don't understand their own liberal repressiveness is producing this reaction, and they're going to have a big surprise because African American working class people and Latino working class people are actually leaving the Democratic Party. Right? The Democratic Party thinks that it has minorities as hostages in their stupid agenda, right? But actually, there is a reaction against liberalism that they want to construe as just like, backward, that I think is a form of dissent against the liberal regime. Like, you know what? We're not going to follow you to that, utopia where economic interests remain completely the same, but we all just don't have biases. That is not our utopia. We want some kind of historical catharsis. And even if it's against our interests at this point, we're going to vote for people who seem to speak more genuinely to the anguish that we feel. And the thing about Trump was that no matter what he was uncensored, he was spontaneous, he was a complete asshole, but he had this kind of like raw emotional energy. Whereas when you see the PMC, like liberal Dems, they are just so spun. They are like all media spin. And that kind of cocooned character, people didn't want anymore. People, when they voted in 2016, the thing about Bernie was he was a more authentic character. He obeyed the discipline of the Democratic Party, didn't break with them. But the question is now, like, that is a big, big, big part of the liberal agenda right now. When people say race, class, gender, they don't want to talk about class. When people in the PMC say that, they want to talk about race and gender. But that class thing, they just stick on as a little, remind, just a little cosmetic post-it note. And I can go on about why class is different from race and gender, but let's finish this.
Go ahead, Nick. You were gonna chime in.
One thing that illustrates Catherine's points to the disdain of the professional managerial class of the workers is that you saw a lot of the professional managerial class orbit the Red-Brown Alliance conspiracy theory. This is also rooted in the idea that workers are dumb, the professional managerial class are the people who should leave, because the idea was rooted that if I reach out to my neighbor who I may agree with on a few issues, I'm a dumb worker that since I'm working with a Trump supporter, I might as well be full Trumper. I'm eventually be pulled to his orbit. The idea that we don't have agencies, that we don't have a strategy, that we don't understand coalition building. That's why they called everyone Red Brown, or they would smear anyone who will work with Trumpers, because that will be building the class all day for us, looking for our class issues instead of the lines that the professional managerial class draws for us. But go ahead, CJ.
Absolutely. I just want to now play his reaction to the question of why is the working class should the working class be the agent of change, of transformative change in this country? And so he reacts in this way. Now, I just want to let the audience know, if you don't know who he is a Marxist also.
I mean, lots of people have been, challenging that notion, right? I think a really popular one now is to say that the working class can't be an agent of change because white workers are just like too racist to make common cause with, non-white workers. And so we should, put aside the notion of the working class and organize along other lines like racial or ethnic lines. Or, you could even say, why don't we organize on the idea of like just a more general, like popular front of the people against like the elite? Why do we still care about the working class?
It's a defining element of the current left that it has zero knowledge of history. I mean, absolutely none. It boggles the mind. So the immediate response ought to be, can you just give me some examples?
Right.
Can you just give me some examples? Because listen, exactly as you say, Jen, there is a sober realism that comes with the acknowledgement that capitalism structurally makes organizing hard. And it's very attractive. And I would love to be able to say, hey man, let's find some other way to change things. Maybe if we put the right guy in power, the great man theory, maybe if we just stick to our ethnicities, maybe racial solidarity is the way to go. Fine. Just find me any instance where that's brought about progressive change. If you can do that, I'm happy to consider it. The reason we stick with the working class is twofold. One, obviously, as the listeners of this show will know, they have a strategic position in the economy that gives them real power against the powers that be. Okay, fine. Perhaps it's just too hard. That might be. Perhaps it's just too hard. And hey, maybe let's settle for second best. As Obama said, let's not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Let's settle for second best and go for, I don't know, some kind of ethnic movement or the enlightened MSNBC watching progressive intellectuals movement, and they can finger wag their way to social justice, or the New York Times and all these people. All right, just find me some instances. You think that maybe not you, but our imaginary interlocutor. You think ethnic, racial solidarity is fine. Find me where it brought about real change for the vast majority. If you can do that, but here's the thing, you won't, because we have 100 years of nationalist movements. It's like the left does not know that there was an independence struggle in the colonial countries. There were nationalist movements in these countries, and in every single one of them, there was a fight as to what the definition of the nation will be, what the nation of the definition of political community be. Will it be defined by the elites the way in this country today, the anti-racist struggle has been defined completely by black and brown elites? Sorry, brown elites. I don't know why I said brown. Brown elites. Or will it be, and the way it was in the anti-colonial movements, where in many countries, it was the elites who took over and defined the nation, or will it be defined along the needs and the interests of the vast majority, which is working people?
So you saw he was surprised by the question. He said, it's basically no acknowledgement of history, or it might be I think one of you spoke to it, that these PMCs, these DSA, they really believe this is different than what Marx. Have you seen the racist Trump supporters? When Marx was around, there was no racist Trump supporters, so he didn't take that into account. So his analysis doesn't include. They really tried to twist and turn their way around this issue, and there is none. You have to organize with the working class. That's it. Like that's the way to do this. Can you speak to any of what he said, or anything that you wanted to include there?
Well, one of the things that I really think I try to teach, and one of the only things I can offer people, I think, is a sense of the present struggles as being embedded in historical struggles. And I totally agree with Vivek that the left has no sense of history. I would say that the Americans have no sense of history. It's neither the right instrumentalizes history or monumentalizes it. It's the Constitution. That's not really historical. I'm going to go back to the sense of the popular need for a historical perspective on these issues. And yet one of the things that is really moving and powerful about understanding the dialectic and the class struggle is you begin to see your struggle, our struggle, as part of a vast historical struggle. And that's what Marx was trying to imbue the struggle of the English working class with. It's like this is a struggle for freedom that for the great majority of people, and we should be part of that struggle. What side of that struggle do you want to be on? It's very, very hard. It's out of our control most of the time. And for PMC people, a lot of their lives are very, like my life, I can control a lot of my life much more than average Americans, right? So you just don't want to be they don't want to be part of this grand historical struggle for emancipation. And one of the ways in which you are humbled by that historical struggle is something the PMC doesn't want to do. This is what I wrote about in my book too. It wants to believe like it's truly the historical vanguard. Like we figured things out. We figured out how to have sex. We figured out how to be anti-racist. We figured out how to raise our children. Figured out how to eat. Why is the world so fucked up when they figured out everything and they rule everything? But still, they just think that they've got all the answers and that they are some kind of vanguard tip of historical progress, and that there will be no more class struggle because we just need to harmonize the various elements of capitalism, and then we can have like the utopia. You know, a lot of this has to do with like the Cold War hangover. When the Soviet Union fell, they're like, oh yeah, you see, this is the best there is. This is really awesome. And this is what we got. Because those guys, they really fucked up. And we just need to have better capitalism, more social justice. We need to cut welfare mothers off from their support so that people don't become dependent on the state. You know, like the Clinton era. We just have to we defeated communism. Well, we defeated communism throughout the world by using the most violent, underhanded methods possible. I mean, you know that in Indonesia, the CIA was instrumental in killing 1 million communist insurgents in that country because the CIA recognized all the important oil reserves. It was the largest Muslim country. It's not just there, though. Think about the coups in Chile, the coups in Iran. Think about all the struggles in Latin America for freedom. America, though, thought by 1989 that it had conquered any idea of socialism or redistributive economic forces, and that, you know, we were just the best people. This was the best system, and the professional managerial class in helping execute the victory of capitalism was just going to preside over it, like, and just make things better incrementally. And the working class is a problem. Poor people are a problem. They're just going to solve that problem somehow. And that's what their attitude is. It's like, poor people are a problem.
Now, you make a great point. And it's to both of you brought up some points that you're going to reiterate here, and you take it a little further. But this is very important also that you speak to here.
Of historical change, but the kinds of rebellion and dissent that the counterculture once prided itself on is so incredibly absent now from the PMC. And what John and Barbara Ehrenreich talked about was how the new left was completely devoid of any real organic working class relations anymore and was dominated by a professional managerial class. And they were very worried about this in 1977 and worried about the direction of the left because the left had become so dominated by PMC values. So I am... Oh, John and Chuck, can I be more specific about why I believe the PMC is in crisis? It's in a crisis of legitimacy right now with regard to
this part right here. I need everybody to pay attention. This is very, very important. A crisis of legitimacy. This is what we talk about.
Its profession of liberal and progressive values, because it always sees itself as being on the side of progress. But because Trump was such an aberration and such an anti-PMC id monster, what we have today is in many ways like the PMC acting as a return to normalcy. It has to embrace like normative liberal values, even though it also wanted to believe. And classically, when John and Barbara Ehrenreich were writing about it in '77, it always wants to believe that it's the vanguard class and that it's rebellion and anti-authoritarian. And now the PMC is finding itself like really dismayed by the kinds of anti-authoritarian forms of revolt that are directed against it.
That is such a key point in our experience here on this network, and specifically in some of the work we do, is this crisis of legitimacy that the PMCs, and I would say PMCs in training, have always thought that they're the vanguards. During the Bernie Sanders party campaign, that was their last year of being sort of viewed as the vanguard. And it's to my opinion that 2020 and beyond, they're seen as the ones that is just trying to go back to being normal. And we're saying, no. All of these things that just happened means we're in a revolutionary time. We need to push forward. We need to push for the most radical things now. This is not, 2012. We just had a pandemic. We had this inflation. We have all this crisis happening all over the world. So can you speak to to that point, or to any part of that video that you wanted to further explain?
You know what's funny is that because Trump was still in power, I felt like certain elements of the left were taken more seriously by the Dem elites. And now I think it's a darker time because they're just like, you got to shut up and put up now because this is the best we can do. Look what's happened to abortion.
Yes.
But I wanted to ask you a question so what do you think are the most radical actions that can be taken now? Because I'm really pessimistic, but I don't want to be. I'm not naturally a pessimistic person. But
it's almost like I set this I like have a agenda, and it's like you're asking the questions in the order that I have the videos.
Oh wow! Okay.
Set up.
Okay.
But there's a particular person who, to me, sort of if we're talking about a politician, or if we're talking about a person who is in the role of a politician, but I wouldn't necessarily call her a politician, Kshama Sawant, to me, she's the prototype of anybody that's looking to move forward for the change that's needed. She is the representative for the working class or she speaks to that, and this clip kind of illustrates that, and then I'll further answer your question.
There absolutely should be a progressive challenger from the left in a militant campaign. I absolutely don't think it should be from the Democratic Party. And I do want to address the specific names that you brought up. But before doing that, I want to say it's much more about the strategy, the political strategy that we as working people use to bring a real challenge to the Democratic and Republican candidates. And the starting point, the ABCs of that strategy are you don't run as a Democrat. Because look at what they did to Bernie Sanders. Every Tom, Dick, and Harry of progressive Democrats supported Bernie in 2020. They were, when I went to the Tacoma Dome to speak at Bernie's rally, they were all there with me. I know these people. They don't support Bernie's politics, but they were there because it was so easy. There was nothing at stake to get on the Bernie bandwagon at that time, and yet then go ahead and support Biden once Bernie was crushed, because we all knew that was going to happen. The Democratic Party elite were going to use some trick or another to get Bernie off the books. And then you got James Clyburn, you got South Carolina, and lo and behold, it happened. We didn't know exactly how it would happen, but we knew it would happen. So the first obligation we have as people on the left, if we are serious organizers, if we have any loyalty to the working class, is to first be crystal clear about that. Whether it makes you popular or not, be crystal clear. The Democratic Party is not the way to go. And I don't want to hear, these things that people come up with on the left where they'll say, well, it's the ballot line, it's a technicality. No, this is no technicality. This is, if you don't run as an independent, you are not taking on the fight that needs to be taken on, which is to present an independent fight back. And if you don't, Bernie was the strongest expression so far of the burning desires that working people have. And I have a lot of appreciation for Bernie, but look what happened. It went nowhere.
Yeah. So to further sort of answer your question, like we feel, or I feel, I'm just going to speak for myself, is that of course Democrats and Republicans Like, we don't need to keep beating the same dead horse. How many years does it have to not work for us to say it's not going to work? We can't take over the Democratic Party. That's not going to happen.
Nope.
Like, they will literally kill us before they allow that to happen.
Yep.
And people need to stop believing in that. And we believe on this network that there's a lot of people in the PMC class that keeps pushing this on the left. Specifically pushing this on the left, and we're here. One of the first sort of Marxist Black network to reach, about to hit 20,000 K as far as followers here. Like, so we have been a shock to left media. The new kids on the block, like we have been a shock to the system here. And because we unapologetically and aggressively push for the working class, and we aggressively call out, those people, because Shama Sawant is, if we were to say what type of person going forward, a person who says no to Democrats and Republican, a person who's independent and understands that this is all about the working class. Like, the type of work she does is all about the working class and not the PMC. So that's what we see as what's going to be working. And that's also hand in hand with, like, mutual aid work, with community work, all of that to build the trust in the community. We really want to use the Black Panthers as the sort of the template where they start in the community. You're building trust in the community. You're also educating them politically, having those conversations, building that trust, organizing a rainbow coalition. So doing that type of work, that's what we believe is the way to go.
I absolutely agree. And, on every, just sort of having this multi-front, multi-pronged approach, being out there in the in working class communities, then fighting in the media and in, more like PMC content controlled world, and really understanding that you need like those different pronged approaches, and like and just not making any compromises with the Democratic Party. The thing that has been harder for me to sort of dissociate from, although I have a group of people around, friends and network who are all quite traumatized by DSA, is also like taking those people away and trying to reorganize our energies. Because it was
something
really
else
traumatic.
happened with. Did something else happen with the DSA?
No. I mean, when Adolph Reed's appearance was canceled, just it was like one thing after another where they showed themselves to be good junior partners to the Democratic Party, really. And it's nothing like a graphic thing. It's more like just understanding, having hope, and then having those hopes dashed, and then moving on again. And I don't want to sound like just like a grumpy person saying, oh, everything is awful. I really like the idea that you have a concrete political position, with regard to the media. And for me, I just feel like I'm going to be out here saying the things that I want to say, despite their lack of popularity maybe within my class. But in the end, I really would like to work on a campaign, see something go through with an independent candidate. And at this point, we can even say maybe we'll lose those first campaigns, but at least we can speak honestly to people. And I think that even if you have the whole media and the Democratic Party apparatus against you, people they're craving like authenticity. They crave real contact. And we need to put that out there as much as we can, and just say these are the real problems that face us. These are the fake solutions that people are giving us. We understand what people need. And it could be just as simple as single payer healthcare. And we're literally being killed by this for-profit healthcare system. And we can just make those arguments all the time, keep making those arguments. A lot of smart people come out at you with all of these numbers. Yeah. And I've just gotten so sick of that. It's like, oh, you think it's that complicated, right? What you're covering up for is the fact that big insurance is totally terrified of its profit margins. And I don't care about big insurance, because I want them not to have profit. I want people's health to be first, not somebody's bottom line. And so if we can just keep making those kind of arguments, trying to get rid of the smoke and mirrors that the Democrats and the liberal reformers try to put up every time we ask for real, profound economic change that has to do with redistribution of the wealth, then I think, slowly, this is what Freud said, the voice of reason is quiet, but it will not be silenced. Just keep repeating these things. It is not reasonable to have our healthcare system. Our healthcare system is fucked up in every single possible way. And if you just build on that single piece, I think it can really work. What's really sad is, I don't know if you're in California, but, we were going to get a single payer. And, that was a bill that was up in the state legislature. And I heard at the last minute, Big Pharma got in there and lobbied the legislature, and it was just it was moved off the agenda.
Right. And that was a Bernie person who took it off. That was a Bernie person who took it off. And like I said, it's almost like we planned this. The next video is queued up perfectly for this particular.
I guess great minds think alike.
This is so the California Democrats proves this video right here. And let's listen to what I said. This is years ago.
What's the use in not accepting corporate bribes if you take orders from someone who accepts corporate bribes? And that is a question that every single person who does not accept corporate money, corporate bribes in Congress, that's a question everyone who does that needs to answer. Because you're boasting about not taking corporate money, you're boasting about being grassroots funded, but then you get to Congress, you get to Washington, D.C., and you take orders from someone who's funded by corporation. You take orders from someone who accepts corporate bribes. So what does it matter if you don't? And my analogy for this situation is this. What does it matter if you're an abolitionist if you take orders from a plantation owner? You get what I'm saying? Like, okay, so you're an abolitionist. You're against slavery. You think it's the worst thing in the world. But then you go and work on the plantation for the worst plantation owner in the South. So what does it matter if you're an abolitionist? Because you're executing the duties, the ideology of your boss, a slave owner, a person who's not an abolitionist. Your personal philosophy is irrelevant if you're carrying out the philosophy of someone else. Like, what does it matter that you believe in humanity, that everybody's equal? What does it matter that you believe that women are just as equal as men? What does that matter if the person you take orders from don't believe in any of that? And that's the question I would pose to all of the squad, all the progressives, anyone who's not taking corporate bribes. Who cares? What does that do when you go to Washington and then you take orders from someone who does? This is why I say there's no way of running as a Democrat without getting a little dirty. You can't expect to wallow in a pig pen with pigs and not get mud on you.
So I'll play. That'll be the last video, but it speaks to the point of why we are so aggressively against supporting the Democratic Party, and we mainly talk about the Democratic Party because we see it as this: in their own narrative, Republicans are the bad guys. We attack the part of the story where you're saying the Democrats are the good guys. Mm-hmm. That's the fallacy. That's the part we need to destroy. Yeah. Is that there is a good guy in this whole thing. Yeah. But because we have this stance, Catherine, we get a lot of pushback from a lot of left media. And I'm talking about the big people. I'm talking about the TYTs. I'm talking about the Majority Reports, the Sam Cedars, the Humanist Reports, you name them.
What about Brianna Joy Gray?
Brianna Joy Gray is a PMC who hangs tough with the revolutionaries. Now, I don't know as far as how she would go, but she's been on, I think, all of our summits. We did an anti-imperialist summit
Yeah, yeah.
She
No,
appeared
no, I like
to
her. I
give
like her as a person.
like
But
so.
she,
She tried. She's probably one of the more successful. Cornel West is another one who is in the reformist camp and also in the revolutionist camp.
Right.
And I think a lot of what people believe in her or believe her don't really come after her is because she's a Green Party voter. If she was somebody that was still kind of voting Democrat, and because of that, people still kind of give her that, okay, at least you're not supporting the duopoly. You're sort of following that, but everyone else, and even people I know that you may like, because I heard you in some video content kind of shout out people. We aggressively go after people like David Sirota. We aggressively go after people like Mariam Williamson. We go aggressively going after Robert Relch. I think that's how you say his name.
Yeah, so,
right. So we take these people as being the problem. The problem of the PMC. So maybe let me ask you this question. Do PMCs change depending on the dynamic of the two people? So if you're talking about me and somebody else, is the PMC change? Can I be a PMC compared to somebody else versus that? Or is not, doesn't really work that way?
I don't know.
I didn't think so.
I don't think so. I don't really understand the question, but here's the thing about Sirota is I told Brianna Drugger and I had this like really fun time talking about the film, but it is just content, and there was like, and I was entertained. I mean, don't look up, but it's really about elites, like experts reporting to the people of Earth who are not getting the message. I mean, that's its basic structure. So that's a perfect technocratic allegory, right? Like the astronomers see the meteor, they try to report it to the press and the government. Nobody cares. See, the whole solution would be like the scientists and the experts and the politicians do something to save the earth. I am the deep belief that those people have screwed things up so badly, and that if we're going to be saved, it has to be a mass organized rebellion from the bottom up. So the very structure of that film was like reactionary to me. I know it's like, and I've been on stuff with Sirota, and he's a really nice guy, but in the end, like his notion of like both political malfeasance and political solutions is all within the technocratic sphere. Do you know what I mean? It's perfect.
Right. So like his reporting, like all of that, like just what he's suggesting of going back to that's the part that we aggressively attack. His reporting, he does some great reporting. That's not at all what we're talking about. But anybody, Mariam Williamson is another person that is just trying to push these leftists, trying to push these communities who are not getting anything from this party. Let's try it again, and we just cannot do that. Yeah.
No, so we're totally on the same page there.
Right.
We're both like we're all exiting the bad relationship. Oh my God! Don't look back. Don't let the door hit you as you leave.
On your way out. I want to thank you for joining us today. This has been a fantastic conversation. I was kind of uneasy because like I said, I've seen all your content in some spaces that we're talking specifically about some of the people. Like, I can say it because it's at the end of the show. I can say it. Jacobin is the mouthpiece for the PMC in our opinion. They're one of the problems. So I want to give you this opportunity to just kind of if you have any last words, if you want to shout out your book, where people can find it. They can find it anywhere. They can find any sort of book, or is it a specific place?
It's online. It's Virtue
else?
Hoarders, the case against the professional managerial class. A lot of it is about things that, Jay, Nick, and I are worried about, which is the political impasse on the left. I'm trying to use language to explode that impasse. I'm not for nuance or expertise, but I am for political analysis and public historical consciousness. I'm working on a book now on trauma and trauma culture and the rise of trauma culture, and how that is also leads us not to any political solution to harm. And it's going to be polemical, but also historical. And I want to salute you guys for doing this project, this public education media, and I just love it. And if I can ever be of help in any way to it,
oh, definitely, we'll definitely have you back on in the future. And again, thank you so much for joining us. Everybody, go out and get the book.
It's free download. It's free download on Manifest. It's both, it's $10 only, but it's also free download online. So.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I'm about halfway through. Read the book. I would say that you're a class trader. At least it feels like you're a class trader. So we love those class traders. So thank you again. I'll put you in the back so you can take off. And everybody, make sure you like the stream. There's like 2,000 comments. I know we didn't get to most of the comments. We just didn't have, we didn't have the time to get to the comments. The conversation was just so great. Thank you, Catherine. And the conversation was so great that it just could not be interrupted. I'll look through the comments and kind of throw some up here. Jazz hands. Oh, I saw the jazz hands comment. Good vibes. Thank you, Catherine. That's from Jen. Yeah, it's gray in my beard. Yeah. With no beard, I look a lot younger, like the video you see there. That video was taken, last year? I think? Year and a half ago? Yeah. Catherine is definitely based. Class trader, decent human, absolutely. Let me go through some more. What's for dinner? What is for dinner? I think my wife cooked or is making a whole chicken in one of those air cookers. She's trying to be real healthy. So in an air cooker. So what is that? I guess it can be considered grilled or baked chicken. Thank you for the great discussion. Yes. Like this stream. We already had a lot of likes. I didn't even have to ask because I felt maybe the conversation was great because the likes were great. I think we might be close to 500 and the stream is not even over. Yeah, 483. We can get to 500 probably before it's over. I'll throw up some more comments. I know there was a lot to go through. Yeah. Thank you for everybody that stayed and watched everything here. Where did I leave off? Yes, Catherine was great. Look, just search her on YouTube and you'll see all of her content where she's kind of, most of the content you see that comes up, she's talking about this topic. Just people bringing on her different shows to talk about this same book or topic. So absolutely. Somebody slandering her. I hope you're not talking like I wasn't slandering. I don't think you're talking. I think you must be talking about somebody in the comments. Yeah. Because I'm not slandering. Bree is one of the few that is able to be in both camps, revolutionary and reformist. Club of Rome aristocracy has captured the left. Club of Rome. I don't know that, but I'll throw that up there. Saying thanks to Catherine. Hit the like button. Yes. Read the book. It's only $10, but she said is you can download it for free also. So you can also download it for free. So check that out. Let me see. Yeah. Not put up all comments. That's fine. Until the middle class leftists get on board. Yeah. Yes, I forgot. Yeah, she brought that up. When she brought that book up, I was going to ask her, hey, there's a trauma expert I have. When that book comes out, I want to bring him on and you to talk about the book. I'm talking about Professor Anthony Zankas. Absolutely, you can. Alrighty. think that might be a good amount. I am starving here. What time is it? Gotta get my daughter soon. Thanks again, Catherine. CJ did this thing today. Great hearing. Yes. Thanks again, Kath. Oh, I already put that one. So, yeah, great stream, everybody. Sounds like it was a great discussion. Everybody was satisfied. It looks like. I was nervous because, you know, when she's in their spaces, that she's polite to them and she doesn't, you know, she answers their questions and talks to them. Maybe they're friends of hers, but the spaces I saw some of her content, our critique is squarely on them, and Jacobin is one of them. It's just weird how they were talking about when they were interviewing her. It was weird how they were interviewing her, and it was clear like they're not asking specific questions, not bringing up specific topics, because literally it's them basically saying we're fucking up everything here. And Jacobin is the magazine for the PMC class or the aspiring PMCs in training. DSA, you heard her critique. We have the same one. So when I heard her say that, that's when I knew, okay, she gets it. And I should have thought that when she said Marxist, but because I saw her in some of these other spaces, I didn't want to assume. Yeah, I watched everything, and because this is a topic we talk about, but we're starting to use this term PMC. But this is the same thing when we talk about reform. It's the same thing sometimes overlapping when we're talking about DSA. We're talking about boutique left. All of that is the same sort of conversation. So this is very intriguing to me, and I'm trying to do this more, where I'm preparing more, and I like to have video because people like to see visually things. Sometimes I do have things to read, but I like to always try to have video in a video form. CJ always got the fresh, crispy lineup. Yeah, I did line up my hair. I need a haircut though. Dana, what's up, Dana? Yeah, she was great. She was absolutely great. Maybe she could be like, hey, these people aren't there yet, but at least they're providing a space for me to provide my Marxist ideology policies. So she could be looking at it as that they're not there yet. So, but I'm gonna, yeah, an air fryer. But I'm going to use this opportunity to do that. So yes. Why is somebody saying he's married? What does that mean? I didn't catch the first part of that question. I was trying to find it, but not terribly important. All right, so I think we're gonna leave it there. I didn't have a video prepared, but I guess I can bring one up. Let me see which one. Let's go here. Let's find a closing video to round us out. What did we go? We went 2 hours and 15 minutes about. Like this stream, join our Substack so you'll get notifications from when we do streams like this. Where is that at? Here is our Substack. Join our Substack so you can be part of, what is this? So you can be, what did I say? Oh, so you can get notifications when we do these types of streams. When we do any stream, really. Or I try to send out all of mine, and sometimes I have to go and send out my RBN comrades videos, and sometimes those aren't live because I'm sending them after they went live. I tell them to send. I've told them to try to stay on that, but they'll get better. We have a meeting actually coming up this upcoming Sunday, so we can talk about some of that. I'm looking for more of a historical video, kind of like those better. So how long is this? This is a short one though. So let's listen to Martin Luther King here. on our way out. I'll let it loop twice since it's short. Let me. All right, so the stream will loop, or this video will loop twice, and then the stream will end. I won't be returning after this video. But thank you for everybody that joined. Like this stream. Let's push this to a bunch of likes. It's important for a lot of people to see this content about PMCs. All righty? All right, everybody. Have a great rest of your day.
I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of the tension surrounding our days. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building tonight. And sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess I'm tired. I'm tired of marching. Tired of marching for something that should have been mine at birth. I don't mind saying to you tonight. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of the tension surrounding our days. I don't mind saying to you tonight that I'm tired of living every day under the threat of death. I have no martyr complex. I want to live as long as anybody in this building tonight. And sometimes I begin to doubt whether I'm going to make it through. I must confess I'm tired.